When a lonely businessman nears the end of another long day, he never expects a tiny 6-year-old girl to walk into his office wearing an oversized apron and carrying her mother's résumé. But little Lani has one mission: save her sick mother from losing their home. This is the heartwarming story of how a single act of courage and bravery changed everything. Thomas Reed stood at the tall glass windows of his corner office, watching Brookhaven City slowly slip from daylight into dusk. The city lights blinked awake one by one, like tiny reminders that the world was still moving, even when he felt stuck. At 58, Thomas had spent more than 30 years building Reed Urban Homes, from one aging apartment building into one of the most respected property companies in the region. People looked at his office on the 47th floor and thought it represented success. But lately, the view only highlighted how quiet his life had become. 4 years had passed since Melissa, his wife, his partner, his balance, lost her battle with cancer. And though Thomas kept moving, kept working, kept signing papers and attending meetings, a part of him had gone silent. His son, Daniel, lived in Denver now, raising his own kids, building his own life. And Thomas, well, Thomas just worked late. He told himself it was dedication. In truth, it was because going home to an empty penthouse hurt more than staying at the office. Just as he reached for his coat, the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Reed," came the familiar voice of his assistant, Diana Brooks, "there's, well, an unusual situation at reception." Thomas frowned. "Unusual how?" "A child, sir. She says she's here for the housekeeping position." Diana hesitated. "She also says her mother is sick, and she came instead." Thomas blinked. "A child? How old?" "6, maybe 7. Very tiny. But very determined." For a moment, Thomas didn't move. Something small and unexpected stirred in his chest, curiosity mixed with concern. "Send her up," he said finally. 5 minutes later, Diana opened the door. And in walked the smallest, bravest visitor Thomas had ever seen. She had shiny dark curls tied back with a faded yellow ribbon, wearing a collared blue shirt and black leggings. But what caught Thomas's eye was the oversized white apron wrapped around her slim body nearly 3 times. It clearly belonged to an adult. In one hand, she held a rumpled piece of paper like it was the most important document in the world. Her round brown eyes were wide but steady as she walked right up to his desk. "Hello, sir," she said, her voice soft but serious. "My name is Lani Rivera. I'm here about the housekeeping job." Thomas came around his desk and knelt, a movement his knees objected to, but his heart insisted on. "Hello, Lani. I'm Thomas." He offered her a gentle smile. "It's very nice to meet you." Up close, he noticed the shadows beneath her eyes, shadows no 6-year-old should have. But she stood straight, chin lifted with a courage that made Thomas's chest tighten. "My assistant said your mother is sick," he said softly. Lani nodded. Her lower lip trembled before she bit it back. "Mommy has a really, really bad fever. She was supposed to come today for the interview, but she couldn't get out of bed. She was crying because she said we really needed this job." Lani held out the crumpled paper. "I brought her résumé. And I wore her apron so you'd know I'm serious." Thomas felt something crack open inside him, a piece of his heart he didn't realize was still breakable. "That was very thoughtful," he said quietly. "And very brave to come all this way by yourself. How did you get here?" "I took the number 14 bus," Lani said matter-of-factly. "The one that goes downtown. Mommy taught me how. I left her a note so she wouldn't worry." Her voice grew smaller. "I told her I was going to help." Thomas had to swallow hard. This tiny child had crossed the city alone, to save her mother. "Would you like to sit down?" he asked gently, guiding her to one of the leather chairs by the window. "Maybe you can tell me more about your mom." Lani climbed into the chair, feet dangling, apron brushing her ankles. She smoothed it with careful fingers. "Her name is Lani Rivera," she said. "She's really good at cleaning. She works at the hospital at night. And in the daytime she cleans people's houses. But one of the families moved away, so now we don't have enough money for rent." A tear rolled down her cheek, but she kept talking. "Mommy said we might have to leave our apartment. She was begging the landlord on the phone. I heard her." Lani looked up, eyes far too wise for her age. "I don't want us to lose our home, Mr. Thomas. I want to help my mommy." Thomas felt his own eyes sting. His son at that age never had to worry about anything more serious than a broken toy. But this child, this tiny warrior, was fighting to keep her family afloat. "May I see your mother's resume?" he asked softly. Lani handed it to him with both hands as if it were fragile. The resume was simple: basic work history, hospital references, and notes from families she'd cleaned for. At the top, written in neat handwriting: "Single mother to Lani, age 6. She is my whole world." Thomas's vision blurred for a second. "Your mother wrote that you're her everything," he said gently. Lani nodded, tears falling. "She tells me every day. She says we're a team. But I can't help. I'm too little. I can't fix anything." "Oh, sweetheart," Thomas murmured, reaching out instinctively to take her small hand. "You're helping right now. You came here. You were brave. That tells me exactly what kind of mother you have, and what kind of daughter she's raising." Lani's eyes brightened with hope. "Does that mean Mommy gets the job?" Thomas felt something warm and unfamiliar break through the coldness he'd been living in. He smiled, really smiled, for the first time in longer than he could remember. "First," he said, "we need to call your mom and tell her you're safe. And then, yes. I think we can help each other." Lani lit up, glowing like the city lights behind them. With Diana's help, they dialed Elena's phone number. A weak, panicked voice answered immediately. "Lani? Me amor? Oh God, where are you? I woke up and your note, what?" "Mrs. Rivera," Thomas said gently, taking the phone. "This is Thomas Reed. Your daughter is safe. She's in my office. And she has been incredibly brave." There was a sharp sob on the other end. I'm so sorry, Mr. Reed. I don't know why she shouldn't have. She came for your interview," Thomas said kindly. "And I have to admit, she made quite the case." Silence. Then tiny gasps. "Mrs. Rivera," he continued softly, "I'd like to offer you a position. Not just housekeeping. A full-time job supervising the cleaning staff across our residential buildings. Salary, benefits, and an apartment in one of our units." Silence stretched. Then, "I don't understand," Elena whispered. "You don't even know me." Thomas looked at Lani, who was watching him with absolute trust. He thought of Melissa, who always believed the world needed more kindness. He thought of all the nights he sat in his silent penthouse, wishing something meaningful would happen again. And he thought of this tiny girl in an oversized apron, standing in front of him holding her mother's dreams in her hands. "I know enough," he said gently. "If a little girl is willing to cross the city alone just to save her mom, that tells me exactly what kind of person you are." On the phone, Elena broke into soft, shaking sobs, years of fear, exhaustion, worry spilling out at once. Thomas waited patiently. When she could finally speak, she whispered. "Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reed." "Thank your daughter," he replied with a smile. "She's the one who showed me who you are." Thomas personally drove Lani home that evening. The building was old, but tidy. Elena met them at the door, pale and feverish, but standing, eyes overflowing as she pulled her daughter into her arms. "Mi Nina, mi valiente Nina," she cried softly. Then she looked at Thomas. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "For seeing her. For seeing us." Thomas shook his head gently. "You reminded me what's important." The months that followed changed everything. Elena thrived at her job. She was organized, respectful, and worked with a quiet strength that impressed everyone. But it was Lani who changed Thomas's world the most. Whenever Elena brought her to the office after school, Lani would sit in the break room doing homework, often humming to herself. Sometimes Thomas would step away from a meeting to help her with spelling words, or listen as she excitedly talked about her day. The office staff adored her. And slowly, Thomas found himself looking forward to those afternoons. For the first time in years, life felt warm again. On Lani's 7th birthday, Thomas hosted a small party at his penthouse, the first celebration that apartment had seen since Melissa passed. Daniel flew in with his kids. They played with Lani, filling the home with laughter where silence used to live. At one point, Daniel stood beside his father and said quietly, "You seem different, Dad. Happier." Thomas smiled. "A very wise little girl reminded me that life isn't about what you collect. It's about who you help. By the time Lani turned 10, she and Thomas had a monthly tradition, dinner meetings, at a new restaurant each month. Thomas would ask for her advice. What color should the new lobby be? What playground equipment should we put at the family complex? Lani took it very seriously, tapping her chin with the tip of her pencil before answering. And Thomas, much to everyone's amusement, actually used her recommendations. Elena rose within the company, eventually becoming director of operations, overseeing every property. But she never forgot her struggle, and she introduced programs to help other single parents, flexible hours, childcare support, scholarship funds. You gave us a chance, she told Thomas. Now I can give that gift to others. 5 years after Lani walked into his office, Thomas hosted a dinner to celebrate the day that changed all their lives. Employees came. His family came. Elena and Lani were seated right beside him. When Thomas stood to give a toast, the room fell silent. 5 years ago, Thomas began, a little girl wearing a giant apron showed up in my office. She was 6 years old and terrified, but she walked in anyway because her mother needed help. His voice thickened. She reminded me that courage doesn't come with age. And that love is the most powerful force in the world. He looked at Lani, now 11, bright-eyed and confident. Thank you, Lani, for being brave. For showing up. For reminding a man who had forgotten joy, what truly matters. Lani grinned. You're not old, Mr. Thomas. And you're not lonely anymore. You've got us. And she was right. He had them. 3 more years passed, quiet and steady, the way a sunrise warms a room without anyone noticing at first. Thomas was 61 now, though he carried himself lighter than he had at 58. There was more color in his face, more laughter in his voice, more warmth in his eyes. Diana often joked that Lani had rebooted him. By age 9, Lani had become a fixture in the company, a tiny whirlwind of kindness who left glitter, stickers, and sunshine wherever she went. Elena was flourishing, too. Her new role as director of operations suited her perfectly. She managed staff with gentle firmness, walked properties with confidence, and handled issues with a grace that made everyone respect her. And Thomas? Well, Thomas found himself looking forward to Elena's presence more than he expected. It wasn't romantic at first. It was grounding. Comfortable. Healing. A friendship that had been growing quietly, layer by layer. One evening, after a long day of site inspections, Thomas offered to drive Elena home. It had become a normal part of their routine, but this time felt different. The city was painted with orange and gold as sunset washed over the skyline. Lani was in the back seat humming softly to herself, legs swinging, from a long day helping organize supply rooms. Elena leaned her head back, exhaustion etched in her features. You're working too hard, Thomas said gently. She smiled. So are you. He chuckled. Difference is I'm old. You're allowed to work hard. I'm supposed to slow down. You're not old, Thomas. You're experienced. He laughed, really laughed, and Lani grinned in the rearview mirror. See, Mr. Thomas, she said. Mommy tells the truth. You're still strong. Still fast. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Fast? Are you challenging me? Lani nodded vigorously. You walk faster than all the security guards. Elena chuckled softly. Thomas felt warmth spread through his chest. Moments like these, moments filled with laughter and easy company, he hadn't realized how much he missed them. As they pulled up to the Rivera apartment, Lani reached out and squeezed Thomas's hand goodnight. Her small fingers wrapped around his gently, confidently. Thank you for bringing us home, she said. You always make us feel safe. Thomas swallowed thickly. You always make my day better, he replied. Elena paused before leaving the car. Their eyes met, just for a second too long. Something unspoken passed between them. Something warm. Something fragile. Then she looked away quickly. Good night, Thomas. Good night, Elena. He watched them walk inside, the street lights casting a soft halo around them. And he realized then, quietly, simply, that his life was no longer empty. He had people waiting for him again. He had a reason to go home. He had a future that didn't feel lonely. And that future had their names written in it. The day Lani turned 12, Thomas hosted another celebration, but this time, it wasn't in his penthouse. It was held in the newly renovated community center he and Elena had designed together, an idea that started as Lani's scribble in Thomas's notebook. Kids need places to feel safe. Elena stood at the front of the room, greeting guests. Her confidence had grown so naturally, so beautifully. She was no longer the exhausted single mother fighting for survival. She was a leader now. A woman who knew her worth. And she wore that strength like a light. Thomas arrived late, purposely, because he'd been picking up a surprise. A brand new yellow bicycle with a ribbon on the handlebars. When he rolled it in, Lani screamed and ran straight into his arms. "You remembered," she yelled. "I remember everything you say," he chuckled, lifting her off the ground. Daniel, Thomas's son, watched from the corner. He approached his father with a knowing smile. "She loves you," Daniel said. Thomas nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "I love her, too." "And Elena?" Thomas went still. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Dad. Please. Everyone sees it but you." Thomas exhaled softly. "It's complicated," he murmured. "Only if you make it complicated," Daniel replied. "You deserve to be happy again. Mom would want that." Those words hit deep. Later that evening, when the crowd thinned and Lani was busy racing around with her new bike, Thomas found Elena by the refreshment table. "Hey," he said softly. She looked up and smiled a little. "Hey. You did an amazing job today." "So did you." Lani is over the moon. They stood in a quiet bubble for a moment. Then Thomas spoke, carefully, softly. "Elena, these past years, you and Lani have brought something back into my life that I thought I'd lost forever." She went very still. Her breath caught. Her eyes softened. "Thomas. I'm not trying to rush anything," he said gently. "But I want you to know. I care about you. Deeply. And if one day you ever feel the same, even a little, I'll be here." Patiently. Her eyes welled. "I do feel the same," she whispered. "I just didn't know if I was allowed to." Thomas's breath hitched. A slow, warm smile spread across his face. "You're allowed," he said. "More than allowed." And for the first time, Elena reached out and took his hand, tentatively at first, then firmly, like she'd made a decision her heart had been waiting years to make. Lani zoomed past them on her bicycle, squealing in delight. "Look, Mommy. Look, Mr. Thomas. I'm doing it." They both turned to her, beaming. And in that moment, they looked like a family. Not a traditional one. Not a perfect one. But a chosen one. A mother rebuilt her life. A child found safety. A lonely widower rediscovered joy. And all of it began because one tiny girl, wearing an oversized apron, walked into an office one evening, and refused to give up on the person she loved most. Sometimes families are born. Sometimes they are made. And sometimes they simply find each other.